Welcome to the Mom Spectrum, where each week moms share their stories about motherhood, careers, and finding fulfillment. This show is to help moms feel more confident because there are a million right ways to be a mom. I am your host, Stephanie Schindler. Today I have Erin Hooley, and I'm so excited to talk to her. Her story is so interesting. I was just telling her that even if I wasn't recording this, I would just personally be so interested to hear all about her story, and I'm going to let her tell it. So can you introduce yourself and your family a little bit?
Absolutely. And first of all, thank you so much for inviting me to be on your show. I'm excited for all that you're stepping into, which is very exciting. Yes, my name is Erin Hooley. I am a mother of six crazy little children who I love very much and keep me very busy. And I am the CEO and founder of Bailey's Blossoms and Peyton Brie as well. We're actually also launching a women's line later this year, but more on that maybe later in the episode. So Bailey's Blossoms actually started out as a hair accessory company when my husband went back to school. He was getting his MBA in Arizona. And when he graduated, it was in the middle of the 2008 recession, ironically. So we're kind of seeing the same little trends going on right now. Not so fun, but thankfully the second time around isn't as scary as the first. And so we're watching the economic downturn. Nobody's getting jobs. We were miraculously blessed that he was able to secure a job in the middle of the recession and actually during a hiring freeze with Mercedes-Benz Financial Services. So it was a massive blessing in disguise. Not even in disguise, it was just a massive blessing. Anyways, so he moved to Michigan, and my kids and I were stuck behind because I was teaching preschool out of our home at the time for about 6 months as we tried to unsuccessfully sell our house, which had, was valued at a third of what we had purchased it for. So that was kind of devastating. And in the evening time, to keep myself preoccupied, I had 3 kids at the time. One was a newborn. And I started making these little hair clips for my daughter, Bailey. And so I named it Bailey's Blossoms because it was named after her, Bailey, and then Blossoms because it originated with these little hair flower clips that I was making. And I've always been very entrepreneurial, so I purchased according to, making sure that I got bulk pricing to make sure that it was cheaper than purchasing it from another store. And then I just figured, you know what, I can sell the extra to cover the cost because I didn't have 2 pennies to rub together. And within 5 days of making the first hair accessory, threw up baileysblossoms.com, put some things on Etsy. I mean, it was just, we were ready to rock and roll, and told my husband, hey, I'm just going to start this new little side gig just for fun to keep me busy because I'm bored out of my mind in the evening times when you're not here. So step back a little bit, and I started looking at how many of these hair accessories I had to make, and I was only selling them for $3 or $5 a piece, and doing some basic math, and I realized, wow, I'm making, pennies on the hour where my time is concerned. And while this is a fun hobby, it's starting to not be so fun when I realize that I'm literally just wasting my time and I'm not making any money. So what can I do to make this a little bit more challenging? What can I do to amplify this a bit? Anyways, so at that point, then I go back and I'm thinking, okay, what else can I do to increase my dollar per hour earnings? And what would complement these tiny little hair accessories that I'm making and really make this more beneficial of my time? So at that time, I started making DIY tutus, and it was a great success. People loved it, but it was really only accelerating or giving me great business for the first birthday sets, which is once a year and once every child's life, and then and also because we were doing costume sets, or I was doing costume sets, also doing it for just like that very seasonal period within the calendar year. And fast forward, I mean, we were doing a fantastic job. Everything was going really great, but I was burning out really quickly in those 3 months, especially around Halloween, because I would turn these little tutu kits into, little bees and witches and superheroes and all these different fun little things. And my husband ended up getting a job offer that took us to Sao Paulo, Brazil for 2 years. And because I didn't have a work visa, I had to shut it all down, which I was very happy to do because I was very overwhelmed. So I know it's kind of one of those things where I'm like, am I disappointed? Am I happy? At the time I chose to be happy. I'm like, this is ridiculous. I was working like 15 hours a day, and just
Wow.
couldn't keep up and ended up flying my mother out for help. And anyways, I was a hot mess. I'm just a terrible hot mess. We had our fourth child. I had shut down my preschool. I was just ready to take a step back and figure out what I really wanted because it happened too fast and I really didn't do it with much intentionality. So, anyways, we go to Brazil. I have 2 years to kind of reconceive what it is that I want to create. And when we come back, I told my husband, "Hey, I want to relaunch Bailey's Blossoms." And he said, "Oh, that's scary." And I said, "No, no, not this time. I got a better plan. This time I'm going to create YouTube videos and show people how to make them themselves. And I'm just going to sell them the kits and give them the product, right? The rolls of tulle, the elastic, the ribbon, all the accessories." Yeah. And so we did that and it was great, except I remember the first time somebody said, "Hey, I love this design, but I don't want to make it." And I said, "Oh, but it's really easy." And she goes, "No, no, no, I don't even really care to learn how to make it. Not crafty, don't care, don't want to do it. Can you please just make it?" And I said, "Well, unfortunately, I really don't want to open up that can of worms because once I start saying yes to
Right.
one, I'm going to say yes to everybody." And so that's when I started thinking, how can I solve this problem for this group of people who just really doesn't want to DIY? What does that look like for them? And I drafted up our first romper and put together a romper with a hair accessory with a chunky jewelry and sold that as a set, all things pre-made that we had just designed in-house, and people loved it. And so that changed. That was really kind of the turning point where we started evolving into a clothing line, which of course is what we are today. But a lot of people don't realize that we didn't start out as a clothing line. We started out as hair flowers, and which is hence the name, Bailey's Blossoms. So yeah.
I love that. That's so interesting. Okay, I feel like your approach was so business minded, but correct me if I'm wrong, you really didn't have a background in business other than just like your personal interest.
Yeah, no background at all. I mean, if you were to go through my childhood years, you'd hear story after story of, the little girl who, sold sack lunches to her friends' parents and then
Mm.
grew up and sold homemade muffins to the construction workers in her neighborhood and booked her friends for uh, I mean, like a babysitter's, like created her own babysitters club, booked her friends out for babysitting appointments, and kept a percentage of the proceeds. I mean, just I was
That's
always
so
doing
awesome.
little quirky things like that. But then when it was time for me to go to college, I remember thinking, no, I'm supposed to be a mom. I want to be a mom, and I didn't believe that I could do both successfully. So I kind of went to college just moaning and groaning, thinking this is a waste of my time and a waste of my money because ultimately I'm just going to stay home and I won't be able to do any of this anyway. So what's the point? So that changed drastically, obviously. Um, my husband ended up quitting his corporate job with Mercedes-Benz Financial Services 3 years ago, and he now works together with me. But it's been a long journey from solopreneur to now, we have a team of 30 people and multi-million dollar success story, which is always really fun to talk about. But really, the hardships have been in the mindset and getting over that solopreneur mindset and really stepping into a more leadership mindset.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a huge change. Like, I mean, that just even thinking about where it started to where it goes from, that's such an intimidating process. And I'm thinking too, so how long was your timeline between all of these big changes within the company? Because you said you had 4 kids when you stopped the first time, but you have 6 kids
Yes.
right
So we had
now.
another child in Brazil, and so we went with four, came back
Wow.
with five. And then when we
I'm sure that's a great
right,
story on its
like
own.
always our little lembrancinha. And when we came back and we relaunched, oh goodness, I was pregnant within 6 months of the relaunch, and we had our sixth child. So I
Wow.
mean, I was 28 by the time we had our sixth child. I was young. So it
Yeah,
happened
super
very
young.
fast. And my oldest at that point was only 8 years old. So 8 kids, or sorry, not 8 kids. Huh, that'd be funny. 6 kids. Let's not do that to myself, shall we? Six children, eight and under. So it's always been a whirlwind of crazy, but I kind of enjoy that.
Yeah. Well, you must.
Yeah.
That's
It's been
amazing.
pretty fun, but one of the big turning points that we didn't touch on is because I started out on Etsy and I came back and I continued on Etsy and I put so much of my time and my effort into that platform until the day that we got kicked off it, and I wasn't expecting that. We had done
Really?
$600,000 in sales in 2015, And it was literally December of 2015. My husband and I are talking and we say, do you think we could actually do this whole entrepreneur thing? Do you think we could be entrepreneurs and you could quit your corporate career? What would that look like? Because I just remember thinking, I've got 6 children. At that point, we were still working out of my garage, but I had 3 or 4 people, moms bringing their kids to my house every day, 5, 6 days a week, helping with customer service, packing shipments, all that kind of stuff. And I just remember thinking, I don't know that I can do this or continue growing this and keep my sanity at the same time without this being a more team effort with him and having that to play off of. So anyways, we decided that come January of 2016, we were going to budget as if his income didn't exist and it was just mine. So at that point, I put myself on payroll for the first time instead of continually putting the money back into the business to grow it. And in January, literally not 2 weeks after we made that decision, Etsy pulled the plug on us and we were no longer on their platform. 85% of our sales happened on their platform. So it was devastating. And I thought that was the end.
Wow.
But I walked out to my team. I told my then office manager, who was 8.5 months pregnant, and said, hey, we're no longer on Etsy. This is what happened. And she said, Erin, are you telling me after I have this baby, I don't have a job? And I looked at her and I said, no, I'm telling you that if you'll be flexible with me, your job description just might change. And she said, okay, well, what the heck does that look like? And so thinking on my feet and nothing short of divine intervention, I just said, I want you to get on Etsy and I want you to individually message every single person who's ever purchased with us and just say, hey, thank you so much for your support. Just wanted to give you a heads up that Bailey's Blossoms can now exclusively be found at baileysblossoms.com. That's it. Just thank them and let them know where to go. And within 48 hours, we saw triple numbers of what we had ever seen on Etsy before. And I was baffled. And I'm thinking, what in the world is going on? Took it to social media and realized that all along people had been tagging Etsy. Where'd you get that cute romper? Etsy. Right. And now all of a sudden it was Bailey's Blossoms, and it was the snowball effect that we needed. And also the kind of forced time out for us to focus on the things that we always said were important, that we would get to that someday, but someday never came, like our website. And once I finally put the time and energy and effort behind these things that I've been putting off for so long and put some effort behind our brand name and our platform and what we had built on our own land that we actually truly could own, that's when all the difference happened. We grew 233% that year and 100% the following year. So it's been quite the whirlwind.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
That's
We're no longer in the garage.
Yeah. So I want to ask, do you think when you started out that you had any idea that it would get this big, any vision? Like, how has your vision changed over time for where your business would
That's
be?
such a great question, because ultimately when I first started, have I always liked to have like busy side projects? Yes, but that's what I called them, little busy side projects. I was constantly downplaying the potential and what I could create based off of the experience and the credentials that I have. I never got my associate's degree. I don't have a formalized education. Heck, I don't even know how to sew. So conceiving up this idea that I could build a multi-million-dollar children's clothing brand where we design everything in-house, heavens no, that never even crossed my mind. Never even crossed my mind. I needed to get over some personal hurdles that I had kind of placed in front of myself, self-limiting beliefs, that kind of thing, to be able to really step into and see what was in front of me. And it took a lot of people telling me, you don't realize what you've created. You don't realize what you've created. I'm like, no, it's really not that special. It's not that hard, but it took a while for me to figure out, this really is something special. And the only thing that's stopping it at this point is me. So move out of the way, Erin. Let's do this.
That's so interesting. So would you say that it was mostly just other people connecting with you and trying to help you get past those barriers? Or like I'm thinking like for myself, like what advice do you have for trying to get outside of those self-limiting beliefs?
Goodness. I mean, ultimately people can tell you all the right things. You can hear it 1,000 times, but until you're the one who's telling yourself, it's not going to make an impact. It's not going to make a difference
Interesting.
because what happens is when we need the validation of other people in order to propel our success, we will never be satisfied. It will never be enough, and we will ultimately constantly sabotage ourselves. So changing that rhetoric, changing that voice inside your head, that story, so to speak, and having that start and end with you just means that when your sister or your best friend or your mother-in-law or your neighbor or somebody at Walmart tells you that your idea is stupid, it's not going to cripple you. It's not going to stop you because you have a vision and your vision trumps everybody else's.
That's great advice. So I want to ask, how has so I mean, you've done all this as a mom. Like this started after you were already a mom. How has this affected your mom journey, and how and like the vice versa of that? How has being a mom affected you
Absolutely.
as a entrepreneur?
Absolutely. I think first and foremost, I had to change my mind of what successful motherhood was. I had a very stereotypical vision in my mind of what made me a good or a bad mom, and and that was hard. That was hard to get over.
Yeah.
What I thought the world needed me to be, what I thought my kids needed me to be. But then when I realized, I stepped back and you know what? Do I believe that I'm going to teach my children, my boys, and say, boys, you dream big because you can be whatever the heck you want to be. But girls, you be careful because your dreams only matter until you become a mother and then it doesn't matter anymore. Is that really what I'm teaching my
Yeah.
kids? And when I look at my daughters and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, the thought devastates me. The thought devastates me. And we see this with amongst women all the time where it's like, well, no, what I love and what I appreciate and what makes me me doesn't matter because now I have these little people that I care for. Well, yes, that is so true that you have these little people that you care for. And wouldn't one of the greatest gifts that you could possibly give them be that taking care of yourself should also be a priority? Not to the detriment or the fallout or negligence of other people, but to let that be a well-balanced portion of who you are and what you stand for. I don't ever want my daughters to have their children grow up, move out of the house, and then they look at themselves and go, "Oh, but who are you? What do you like to do? I don't even know anymore. It's been so long since I thought about it." And that's just heartbreaking. I think that's where we see so much emotional angst and turmoil, and sometimes even bitterness, which is a strong word, but we see that in women and the struggle with women in motherhood, where we hold ourselves to this standard that is completely a facade.
Yeah, I think that's very true. Yeah, and it's interesting too how it's so much like we put these kind of expectations on ourselves that we would never put on loved
Oh,
ones. And
never.
kind of once you can turn it around that way, it's like, oh, wait a second.
Yes,
Like that if it's not true for them, it can't be true for me. So
absolutely.
that's very interesting. Do you have advice about either managing time or even just managing the mindset of making that change? Like, I'm sure you've been through all these transformations as the business has grown.
Yes,
How were you kind of able to manage that
absolutely.
with like within your household?
So the whole concept of balance, I think, is somewhat thwarted, where people just assume the only way to be balanced is, okay, if I have 6 hours in my day to allot and I have, three different things, well, then the only way to be balanced is 2 hours for you, 2 hours for you, 2 hours for you. Well, that's not the case because ultimately, how many times are we with our children, but we're not with them because we are checking emails, we are distracted
Yeah.
with something else, we're not present. And same thing with work. If you're focusing on a work task, but you're constantly being pulled away by your thoughts being elsewhere or whatever it happens to be, you're not as effective. So the concept is to be present. It doesn't matter how much time you have to allot, it matters how present you are in the time that you've allotted. And if you can be fully present in each of the areas as you're there, that is so much more valuable. And at the end of the day, I know and feel accomplished when I can look back and say, man, I had that great memory that I made with my kids today. Man, I really knocked this appointment out of the ballpark. Man, I really, whatever happens to be, you can go through and say, and the reason that those were all successful is because I didn't allow distractions to be there. I was present. That's the only difference.
Yeah.
It's just the ability to be
Yeah.
present. That creates balance.
That's interesting. That's so relatable too. It's interesting how it's just so easy today to not be present.
Yes. Oh,
And
goodness,
and
yes.
it's like it's so not a working mom, stay at home mom kind of thing. It's all of us just it doesn't matter how much time you're spending with your kids, it's how much you're present for your
Yes.
kids. I think that's very true. Um Okay, so let's kind of fast forward to where you are today. So your kids are all still at home, right? They're all still
Well,
young-ish.
no. So Bailey's actually 14 now. We're starting the whole high school thing next year,
Okay.
which is kind of
Oh,
crazy.
wow.
And my
That is
baby
crazy.
went to kindergarten this year. So
Oh,
that was a weird change.
wow.
But currently, right now, with the whole situation, yes, they are all still home.
Those are like two big elementary school,
I
high school.
know. Elementary and middle school is where we're at, and then moving into high school, which is just crazy.
Yeah,
Happens really
that
fast.
is
Don't blink.
crazy.
Oh my word.
Yeah. Oh man. So and then where are you with the business? So you're opening a new
Yeah.
line. Is it a new line or a new business?
Both.
I don't
So
know if there's yeah, okay.
we launched a new business, which was Peyton Brie, which is a sister brand. We did that last year, and that's for tweens and teens. And the reason we did that ultimately is just because my daughters grew out of Bailey's Blossoms, and because it's 0 to 3 months up to 5T clothing, and Mommy and Me as well, which we launched also last year. And
Okay.
so I wanted to do tweens and teens because it's a very underserved market, and I saw the pain points in the trying to shop for my own girls and figured, you know what, I know how to solve these, so why
Mm,
not? So we launched Paint and Brie, and that's been a really grand adventure, and now we're just kind of completing that circle, launching a women's line, and with the intent that we're creating this community where people can constantly have a place to come home to, where you've got your 16, 17, 18-year olds who can shop from this new line, which is going to be called Alradine. And then they grow up and they have their baby and they come over to Bailey's Blossoms. That baby grows up and they go to Peyton Brie. And then that girl grows up and she goes to Alradine. So it's just this cycle of home that we're trying to create. And they're really stemming from my desire to connect with my girls and to provide them with something, which has just spread out to providing that to the world.
that's so cool. How has your family been involved with the business?
Oh goodness. Well, my husband's our CFO, so that's a big one. Uh,
It's huge.
but no, I mean, our we after we moved out of the garage, we moved over into a 6,000 square foot warehouse in Decatur, Texas, which we were, renting. We thought we would be there for a solid 5+ years. We didn't last very long at all before we outgrew it. And we built a 25,000
Wow.
square foot warehouse about 8 minutes down the road from us, which is where we're in now.
Wow,
And
that's awesome.
so it's really close. So I mean, the kids come over here a lot. My husband's office even has a couch and a TV in it for them if they, need to come over after school or if we
Yeah.
have someone who's sick or whatever. So we have that flexibility. But we've always allowed them to be a part. Even just the warehouse picking process has been done in such a simplified way that they can come and they can help. They can come and they can pack a package with mom. They can, I mean, whatever it happens to be, we want them to see and
Yeah.
we want them to experience that work ethic and take pride in it.
Hmm.
Is the biggest, I think, one of the biggest tragedies when parents have been so blessed and so fortunate is to create a sense of entitlement in their children. And that's the thing that I try the hardest to not do. And so allowing them to
Hmm.
come and be a part, allowing them to see the hardships, the struggles. I want them to see not just the good stuff, I want them to see the really hard stuff too, so that they have
Yeah.
a very real grasp on what entrepreneurship looks like and what getting through a really hard trial looks like, because all of those things are going to happen regardless of whether it's in business or otherwise.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's so cool for your kids to kind of get that sense of accomplishment of being a part of it
Yes.
too. I think that that's something I hope I can provide to my
Yes.
kids someday. That's really awesome. So, okay, what advice would you have for women who are kind of at that beginning stage, like maybe the stage you were at when you were making bows at home, where they're like on the cusp of this mompreneurship thing, and they're interested in it, but probably still have a solopreneur mindset.
Yeah.
What would be your advice to women there?
I think first is to get very clear on your goals and not to do it in a way that makes you comfortable. I think that if you are looking at your goals and you're thinking, oh, yeah, that's good, I can do that, they're not big enough. There should be a little bit of fear involved. You should be questioning whether or not you're thinking too big, because ultimately that's the only way you will ever grow. You got to push yourself outside of comfort. And so really defining those big, bold, scary goals that make you nervous to put in writing, put it in writing and then back into the plan. And that's the thing is I think so many people think that it's luck, but there's a formula
Mm-hmm.
to success, especially success in e-commerce. And really seeking to understand that and back into your strategy, it's that makes all the difference in the world. It wasn't until I really got clear on that we started to see some phenomenal success.
Interesting. Yeah, I wanted to ask too. So, I mean, were there things along the way that you felt like, okay, this is the next step, but I don't know how to do it? And how did you overcome
Oh,
that? And like, how
absolutely.
did you learn new
Hallelujah
things?
for Google. I mean, truly. I mean, ultimately, that's how I even started the business. How do I start a business? How do I protect I didn't even know what to call it, trademark. I had no idea. I said,
Yeah.
how do I make sure nobody steals my logo? I mean, all of these
Yeah.
things. And
Yeah.
it's just, we live in a day and age where we have a plethora of information at our fingertips. So we have no excuses to say, oh, I don't know how. You might not know how, but somebody else does. And if you put in the time and the effort and the research, you'll know how by the end of the day or by the end of the week. You just have to prioritize it. And so and that's where it is, where it's like, if I have a goal, if my goal is to launch this business, and I'm going to say, I want to launch a sweater line that's going to be $100,000 a year. Maybe that's my goal. Okay. So then it's okay. Well, now that I have this goal, what do I need to do to get there? And it's going, okay, well, if I'm going to launch a sweater line, it's going to be brick and mortar, it's going to be e-com. E-com. Awesome. Okay. So if I'm going to launch an e-commerce website, now what do I need to do? Well, I need a social media presence, but I need a website first and foremost. And then you say, okay, well, if I need a website, what do I need to do? Well, first I need to find a host provider. Well, then I need to do this. And then I need to, I mean, it just breaks it down into bite-sized snippets. And the more you can break it down, then it becomes super easy. It's a very clear roadmap. When you're just looking at the top of the staircase, of course you're going to get overwhelmed. Of course you're going to be scared. But when you start to put the steps in place, then all of a sudden you just start climbing. And before you know it, you turn around and you realize, wow, dang, I got gotten pretty darn far. So it really just, it's putting together a plan so that your goal doesn't just become a wish, it becomes an actionable, tangible plan.
Oh, this is all just so interesting to me. um, okay, well, do you have any like general advice or anything else about your story that you can share with
Oh,
us?
goodness. I think one of the things I love the most about entrepreneurship is that for as much as you're growing in a business sense, you're also growing in a personal sense. You learn so much about yourself in this journey, and you have to be open to critique and to feedback, even if it hurts. All of the growth that we've experienced has been because somebody has said the hard thing that nobody wanted to hear, but we chose to hear it anyways. Having somebody say, I don't want to make that stupid tutu set. Give me another idea or another option. Or even with our sizing, hey, your sizes are way too small. That didn't feel good, but it got me to
Mm,
figure out what industry standard sizes were. And it got me to figure out how
interesting.
to start grading properly and how we needed to put specific steps in place to make sure that never happened again. And so, I mean, there's all of these things. It's not just, I don't want to stand underneath a shower of perpetual praise. It's too comfortable. It doesn't make me move forward. It makes me stand perfectly still because it's comfortable. I want the uncomfortable things to happen. I want to challenge myself and I want to allow other people to challenge me. And that does and oftentimes come in the form of constructive criticism or just criticism that we can choose whether or not to make it constructive or not, and
Yeah.
and using that as a propellant, because that ultimately will show you where you need to point your efforts next. You find the truth in what people say, and then you decide, am I okay with this truth and I'm going to stay where I'm at? Or if I'm not okay with it, what do I want to change? And what does that look like? Ultimately, in entrepreneurship and in personal life as well, The only things that get in our way is number one, it's a skill. We lack a skill, which, by the way, we can learn. Or number two, it's a mindset, which we can get over. So identify which one it is. Is this a mindset that I need to get over? Or is this a skill I need to learn? And if it's a skill, let's learn it. If it's a mindset, let me kind of back into that and figure out, why do I have it, and what's the alternative? How do I get over it?
Thank you, Erin Hooley, for sharing your incredible journey building your businesses, all while being a mom. You can find Erin at erinehooley.com and on Facebook and Instagram at Erin E. Hooley. And check out her podcast, Conquering Chaos, on all major podcast directories. Thank you, audience, for listening. You can connect with me and find show notes at themomspectrum.com. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend. Next week, join us to hear from Sophia Lundy, a young mom who has lived in Haiti, the United States, Nicaragua, and now works in the construction industry in Montreal.